Today, we celebrate the life of a literal king by remembering his dream. 66 years ago, a 33-year-old African-American man, a husband, father, minister, and highly educated civil rights leader, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., stood in front of a great cloud of witnesses to share what his idea of freedom looked like. Today, I want to dovetail this dream into my vision of sweet dreams in today's ever-evolving, yet stagnant climate. This is Sweet Dreams Are Made of This, featuring the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech.
In what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. Five score years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination.
Dr. King went on to say how America had defaulted on its promissory note and had written colored folks a bad check, but spoke of how he knew the Bank of Justice was not bankrupt. One could rightly determine that his faith in the treasury of the justice system was justified. After all, how could something be deemed blind, as in blind justice, but show or act with racial bias? He spoke of how we were coming together to cash a check for the riches of freedom and the security of justice. Furthermore, he warned that those who had hoped that the Negro would just blow off steam and become content were in for a rude awakening if the nation returned to its business as usual. He said that the whirlwinds of revolt would continue to shake the nation until we got justice. But it would appear that the Negro, now turned African American, has been lulled into a place of contentment, where action is taken only in strongly worded social media posts, tweets, retweets, and memes. So then it would appear that we have bankrupted the King's promise of civil unrest until justice is served. Being one of peace, Dr. King was careful to remind us of our white allies, saying that on that day, some of the white brothers stood in solidarity, knowing that their freedom was inextricably bound to our freedom. But he urged us never to become too satisfied, as long as the Negro was the fifth victim of police brutality, that he moved from one ghetto to the next, that he questioned his selfhood and dignity because there was always a whites-only sign on a restaurant or establishment that made them feel less than. He told us never to become satisfied. And yeah, since then it feels like we have made great strides. Why, we are now in gentrified ghettos. Some of us have moved into well-to-do surrounding suburbs. We are no longer turned away from whites-only restaurants and establishments with policies in place designed specifically to keep us out based solely on the color of our skin. We've even had a black president. Oh yes, darling, we have come a long way. But what of the injustices, the police brutality that continues to occur to our black men and women in the streets? Surely we can't think that we have arrived yet. Dr. King said that the Negro in the South could not vote, and the Negro in the North felt there was nothing for which to vote. Yet he told us not to be satisfied and urged us to push on and fight. Yet 66 years later, we find ourselves questioning the validity of the vote, the tampering with the vote, the overall purpose of the vote. We have reverted and decided that the fight for the vote, the bloodshed for the vote, the marches for the vote, the political enactments to vote are hereby null and void, and we sit at home and watch the television and again take to social media with the I told you so's in tow because we have lost the will to gain overall satisfaction and have reverted to a place of complacency that only guarantees our absolute demise and the reversion and corrosion of all that we have worked so hard towards thus far. But the king could tell that these dark times would come and that things would get bleak, and urged us again to not be satisfied. He maintained that despite all of this, he had a dream. He dreamed about freedom and justice for all, about a nation that would live out the true meaning of its creed, that all men are created equal. In this dream, he saw that his children were judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. That little white boys and little black boys and little white girls and little black girls could join hands. That every valley would be exalted, crooked places made straight, rough places made plain, and he could hew out of mountains the stones of hope for a symphony of brotherhood to stand together, that we would all be free one day. He cried, "Let freedom ring." And I ask you on today, let freedom ring from what? My sweet dream involves freedom that rings from an oppressive judicial system that seeks only to validate its stake as the means by which justice is served, while simultaneously operating as if it is oblivious to its societal purpose. Until this is not the case, every case involving a black man is questionable. Freedom from the terrors of your life flashing before your eyes during routine traffic stops because it could very well end in death. Freedom from having your voice stripped and having to move from one ghetto to another because gentrification is taking place and you have to move at a moment's notice because you can no longer afford to live where you've called home your whole entire life with your children and family. Freedom from police calls and alerts for simply enjoying life as a black man or woman in this country, the country your forefathers built. Freedom from the very same fight that has been in action for decades with little advancements for colored people. These freedoms would allow us to fly free, breaking free from the chains that threaten not only black people's progress, but everyone's. For an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. And though it may seem that King had a dream that we woke up from into a nightmare of a reality, I believe that if we place enough onus on ourselves and pick up the mantle and continue to fight, we will find the vision that he spoke about so eloquently sitting just there. Let's keep his dream, his legacy, his hopes for a better America alive. Complete with these freedoms, we will find that sweet dreams are made of this. So for all that you have done, from all of us here at 66 years later, Dr. King, we thank you and we wish you a happy birthday.